Hello everyone, I'm Norman Wahlberger. Today I'd like to discuss the issue of staff notation for our music that's commonly used in the Western world, where we have some story like this, especially suited really for piano, but pretty well also used for a wide variety of other instruments. Percussion is a little bit different, and we'll have to talk about that in a quite separate way. So there are really two major issues that I want to start moving towards, and they are very important because I think it's pretty clear that the system that we're using now, even though historically really well grounded, is not really very optimal and presents a hurdle for young people and in fact just anybody trying to enter the musical world. It definitely is a hurdle, and there's probably a lot of opportunities for improving our understanding of music by having better notation. So this is especially sensitive issue for a mathematician, because mathematicians are acutely aware of the importance of notation in being able to guide you in fruitful directions of investigation and discovery. Frédéric Chopin, Mazurkas, Opus 7, number 2. So here is the first line or so of the Mazurka of Chopin that I played you. And it's just a way for me to illustrate some of the features that we find with the modern staff notation. So what do we see here? Well, we have this whole thing is called a staff, this configuration. We have 5 lines on the top and 5 lines on the bottom. This is called the treble clef. This is the bass clef. Typically this is the right hand and this is the left hand on the piano. And these funny looking things here are sort of centering where this clef is sort of located in terms of pitch. It's like a G clef here, okay? This 3/4 is representing the time signature that's represented by these bars. So these segments that we have separated by these vertical lines are called bars, and each bar has a certain number of beats in it, okay? And in this case, there are 3 beats per bar. That's what that numerator, that fraction kind of thing is telling you. There are 3 beats in a bar, and the denominator is telling you that a quarter note, which is a special kind of note, this is a quarter note here. Okay, that's what it looks like. This is also a quarter note. These are both different representations of a quarter note, sort of a black filled-in note with a single stem. That note gets a single beat. So there are 3 of these guys in each of these bars. Okay. What else do we see? Well, we see some Italian viva ma non troppo, so some brief indication of the tempo. And here is actually a metronome unit. I'm not sure if Chopin put that in, but perhaps the editors put that in. A suggested time speed, 160 beats per minute, perhaps. And what we have here is in the right hand, typically sort of a melody, and you can see various different variant notes, okay, quarter notes. This is called a half note. These are 8th notes. These guys here, these are 16th notes, and there's actually a triple of them there. We see some signs either going smaller, like diminishing in tone, in volume, or increasing. It's a crescendo there. We see little dots. The dots are to indicate staccato, so the note is supposed to be just touched briefly. And importantly, especially for Chopin, are these phrase lines that tell you that this should all be in one phrase. It's like when you're singing, you sort of start here and you go there and then you take a breath. Okay, so phrasing. But sometimes these kind of bars also indicate that notes are to be played continuously. That is, you're not going to lift up. What else? There's a rest here. This is a quarter note rest. So there's 3 beats in this bar. The first beat is sort of taken up by the rest, meaning that you're not actually playing there. You're playing on the second and the third. Now, in terms of the actual notes themselves, well, this is this system of notation that we are familiar with somewhat, okay, that we're going to have to talk a lot about. And you see that their key signature, which we talked about last time, is absent here, or put it another way, this is suggesting that we're in the key of C. Well, actually, we're not in the key of C in this piece. So it turns out that for a major scale, if you were playing in a major scale, the absence of sharps and flats here at the beginning would alert you to the fact that you're in C major scale. But this piece is actually in a minor scale, reflective of the somewhat melancholic nature of the piece. It's in a minor key, and it's in a minor key which is associated to the C major scale, sort of closely connected to it. That's the A minor scale. Closely connected in the same sense that the C major scale and the G major scale are closely connected, namely they share a lot of common notes. Okay. So you can't actually just look at the key signature and immediately tell what key you're in. You could be in a major key or the corresponding minor key. But nevertheless, even in this little segment here, we see there's some additional sharps going on. There's no flats in this case, but there's a sharp here, okay? So when we get to this note here, it's ordinarily a C, but there's a C sharp in front of it. And here there's a D, but that's a D sharp. And down here, there's in the bass clef, that would be ordinarily a G, but there's a G sharp. And this sharp here also applies to all the other notes, similar notes in the bar. Okay, so that note there is also a G sharp. This thing here is a different kind of symbol. This is a natural sign, which undoes the sharp sign or the flat sign. So we just had a D sharp here, and this natural here is telling us that we should revert back to a normal D. Now, strictly speaking, legally speaking, this flat is not actually required, because the understood rule is that these sort of occasional sharps and flats that you find in bars only go up to the end of the bar, and then their effect is off. Okay, but this is just a kind of a reminder to the player that, okay, you just did play a D sharp, but now we're back to ordinary D. Okay, so that's a brief introduction to some of the features that we have, and you see it's quite a rich story, and centered all on this way of representing notes on the piano, or more generally just musical notes on a staff. Okay, and it's this correspondence that we want to have a very good look at. Okay, so the main issue here is, how do you actually represent notes, different pitches, different frequencies on a page? How do you put a piece of music on a page so that somebody can just play it without having heard it before? In the Middle Ages, they had some rather primitive system where you just had sort of some marks on a page, sort of going up and down very roughly, sort of corresponding to whether the melody was going up or down. But when you're playing a keyboard, and there's lots of notes that you could be playing at any given time, and the relationship can get quite complicated, you need a rather more systematic procedure. And so what we've adopted in today's music, in the Western world at least, is the staff notation, which is firmly rooted on the keyboard. Okay, you can think of the piano, and we have to understand it in that context. So here is a piece of a piano. There's C, there's a C there, so this is like the standard 12-tone scale, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, then back to C, with the white notes being named C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C again. And the standard convention is that the treble clef, so the top part of the staff, the thing that has this funny thing in front of it, that's a place where these notes from middle C to the next C up are represented in a logical and systematic fashion, starting with middle C being actually not on the staff, but on this auxiliary line that you have to draw just below the staff. So there's another line here, sort of meant to be like an extension of this one, but just one down. And there's the note C on that. And then what we do is we go up one, either going to essentially a space between lines or on a line itself. So space, line, space, line, space, line, space, etc. And we're just marching up the white notes here. So that's representing C. This thing here is representing that note. This E representing that. There's F, there's G, there's A, there's B, and there's C. And we could carry on. So the next one up here would be D, which would be the following one, etc. And there's a corresponding story in the bass clef. So that's somewhat logical, at least if you're a piano player, because it follows exactly what's happening with the white notes. But the complexity has to do with the black notes, because the black notes are also part of our 12-tone system. And in principle, they're playing an equal role. But they definitely do not get an equal role when it comes to their representation in our staff system. This is a crucial thing that we have to appreciate, even though it's maybe a little bit uncomfortable for us. So the black notes get quite different treatment. So here they are, just in this single octave range, and each one of these black notes has two names because they're each associated to two white keys, one on the left and one on the right. So this black note here is to the right of C and to the left of D. So it actually has two different names and two different representations. One as C sharp, where we take this C and we put a sharp, raising it by a step. So that's C sharp. That's one way of describing this. Another way is to think of it as being D going down a step with a flat symbol, so D flat. And the same then occurs with all these other ones. This next one here is either D sharp, represented this way. So we're taking that D and putting a sharp in front of it, or we're taking this E and putting a flat in front of it. D sharp or E flat to represent this one. Then this one here is either F sharp or G flat, represented this way or this way. This one here is either G sharp or A flat. Pardon me. Ugh. There we go. G sharp or A flat, that one there. And finally this last one here, A sharp or B flat. And here's the source of a lot of difficulty and challenge for playing music, is that if you're not just always playing in the key of C, dealing with these black notes is a lot more cumbersome, because first of all, they have this duplicity of representation, and there's an auxiliary aspect to them. They don't fit so easily into our staff notation. We have to have these special symbols, the sharps and the flats, and we end up thinking of them as sort of secondary to the white notes. So here is an example in that mazurka that I just played. The second part of what I played was a little bit more complicated in terms of the melodic structure. There are a lot more sharps and flats. So have a look at this second part. Okay, you'll see that it's quite a lot richer, and there's all these sharps and flats and naturals and so on that have to be put in. And so it definitely ups the complexity of the music, and reinforces the idea that there's really a very strong ad hoc aspect to all of this, because we're basically just taking what's happening with the piano and sort of imposing it on the entire musical world. Now there's a second issue that has to do with how we represent the length or the extent of notes, how long a note is going to be played. So that might be in terms of beats typically, right? If we have a set beat system in our piece, then we might want to know, well, a given note, is it going to be 1 beat long or 2 beats long or maybe half a beat long, etc. So here is the standard convention that we use, and probably the best one to start with is this quarter note, which sort of plays a central role. So the quarter note is represented by a solid note head. So in terms of notation, this part of it is called the note head. This is called the stem. And then if there's some things like this, like little flags, they're called tails. Okay, so the quarter note has no tails. There's a note head in black and a stem. And the stem can be either up to the right or down to the left. And okay, typically the quarter note gets one beat, which is a little bit idiosyncratic notation, we have to admit. And in terms of that, if you want to have a note that's twice as fast, that's the eighth note. That's represented as the quarter note like this with a single tail. So 2 eighth notes make a quarter note. So if a quarter note, let's say the beat is like this, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if I was playing quarter notes, I would play ba, 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 just with the beat. That's the quarter note. If I'm playing eighth notes, it would be ba, 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 2 to a beat. If I'm playing 4 to a beat, ba, 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 faster, that would be a 16th note with 2 tails, and much faster, I won't attempt it, 32nd note, so we're dividing by 2 each time. Now, when we have a lot of these together, then typically we do the following kind of thing. So here are some eighth notes, okay? So the tail here becomes part of this sort of extension that links these two. So these are 2 eighth notes that would have the same time total as a quarter note. And here are 4 16th notes, 4 of these guys, as you can see by these sort of this double bar there. That's telling us that we're basically having 2 tails. So these are 16th notes, and 4 of them would be the same as 1 quarter note. Now in terms of longer notes, there's the half note and the whole note. The half note, as the notation suggests, is worth 2 beats. So if here are beats and I'm seeing half notes, it'd be like this. Ba, 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 those are half notes. And whole notes, well, that would be ba, ba, 4 beats for a whole note. Now there's a little bit of variation. Sometimes we use dots to go halfway between these two things, but that's a little bit more secondary. And I also want to point out that the stems can either be going up to the right like this or down to the left, like in this case here. And there's another kind of situation that we actually saw in the mazurka where we had 3 things together with a little 3 under there. That's telling us that we should play 3 of these in the time of 2. So if these are like eighth notes, okay, so if here is our beat, ordinary eighth notes would be like this. Ba, 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 ba. If we have something like this, they look like eighth notes, but there's 3 of them in the place of 2. So instead of ba, 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 we would play ba, 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 3. 3 to a beat instead of 2 to a beat. So that's an eighth note, triple 3 in the time of 2. Now, you can see that there's a sort of a difference here, right? There's some logic to what we're happening when we're making the notes shorter. But when we are going to longer notes, we're changing our logic, okay? Instead of doing something to the stem, what we're doing is we're changing the note head itself from a black note to a white note. And then one more going from the half note to the whole note, we're getting rid of the stem. So this is definitely a little bit obscure or not entirely logical, why we're doing this. So whenever we have a system where we are doing illogical things, there's room for us to think, okay, what would be a sensible way of doing this? What would be a better, more logical approach to both of the issues that I've talked about today? And this is a hugely interesting question, which I'm certainly not the first to have thought about, okay? This issue has come up over and over again in the history of music. People have looked at our notational system and said, actually, we probably could do better than this, In the 20th century, Arnold Schoenberg, who's a sort of famous 12-tone composer, a very avant-garde, influential 20th century composer, spent a lot of time thinking about this. But actually quite a lot of people over the years have devised different notational systems both from the first issue in terms of actually representing the pitches on a staff, and in terms of this second issue of how we represent the length or the extent of notes. So both of these are well worth thinking about, especially from a mathematical point of view. Like, what would an AI do? We're going to think about that. I'm Norman Wildberger. Thanks for listening.